And notably, just like the difference in conditioning. Now, of course, Ian is on Finasteride. So that is something that, inhibits DHT significantly. He's using it for hair loss prevention, but did it inhibit his conditioning whatsoever? What's up guys, Derek, moreplaysmartleads.com. Today we're going to be talking about Finasteride and if it's going to inhibit you from losing fat and getting shredded or gaining muscle. So I've talked about the gaining muscle part many times in terms of if you're inhibiting DHT production, you actually have a subsequent rise in total testosterone levels, and that amount is going to be dependent on how much you're inhibiting 5-alpha reductase. So if you have 70% inhibition with Finasteride, you're going to get maybe a 60 to 70% decrease in systemic DHT with a subsequent 15% increase in testosterone and estrogen as a result of when you're inhibiting the enzyme, now the testosterone can't convert into DHT, so now you have more testosterone and as a consequence, more estrogen too. When you use dutasteride and you inhibit upwards of 99% of 5-alpha reductase activity, you have almost no DHT in your body at all, literally less than a prepubescent girl essentially. You have a situation where 5-AR is so inhibited, even more is left as testosterone and, consequently aromatized into estrogen. You have a 22% approximately, give or take, increase in testosterone and estrogen. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you get a giant bump in free testosterone to the point where it's, going to make a massive difference in terms of muscle growth. However, what we do see in the clinical literature is there is no deleterious impact to muscle growth outcomes. Like, you're not going to lose a bunch of muscle because of Finasteride, dutasteride. Now, maybe, downstream you could argue that actual motor neuron recruitment in the gym is inhibited because of lack of DHT. You no longer have that mind-muscle connection. You're not as snappy with the weights, and as a result of using smaller loads because you can't literally push as much weight potentially, then as a consequence, you might maybe lose some muscle, but does that actually happen in practical application? It doesn't, not really. Like, you're not going to take Finasteride and all of a sudden find that your lifts all go down like 100 pounds. It just doesn't work like that. So in terms of getting shredded, does it make a difference? It's like, yeah, obviously DHT is going to help with fat loss to some extent, and more so in a cosmetic visual look too. Like, you probably know that bodybuilders intentionally use DHT derivatives pre-contest intentionally in order to kind of get that dried, cosmetic, grainy look that you can achieve via inhibiting estrogen-induced RNA transcription at the receptor site and potentially competing for aromatase to some extent as well. People use Masteron, they'll use Primo pre-contest, they'll use Halo, not a DHT derivative, but still not a potent substrate for aromatase. Anivard, Adria, Winstrol, things like this that are just dry compounds and will kind of increase that androgenicity relative to estrogenicity in the body and create a more grainy androgenic look. So if you're on Finasteride and you're even at the top level, looking at the cream of the crop, how is it going to impact your physique when literally you need to look like an anatomy chart? So I thought Ian Vairb is another good example of this. So I've talked about his hair loss regimen a handful of times because he's one of the only top guys who's actually talking about it, to be honest, and maybe one of the only top guys who actually has one. I don't really know, but he talks about his Finasteride use and how he's been on it for a while now. And recently, he had a very good showing at the Olympia. He got the best placing he's ever had in his life, and he shocked a shit ton of people with how well he did and shut a lot of haters up and, did amazing. His conditioning, notably, is what I wanted to touch on because this left the fat back with the snow in Canada this year. So this year, notably, he had one of the best looks on stage in terms of overall conditioning. He came in just perfect in this show, and really, it was really redemption for him at this show. Guy, especially with Hunter beside him, and he beat him out this time. And notably, just the difference in conditioning. Now, of course, Ian is on Finasteride. So that is something that, inhibits DHT significantly. He's using it for hair loss prevention, but did it inhibit his conditioning whatsoever? No, it didn't. And the reason being is because it's not like you can't introduce another androgen into your system to achieve the same effect that whatever endogenous DHT would have been created would have otherwise done. So, just because Ian has, 30% of his systemic DHT, it's not like you can't just increase the mast a bit more, increase the whatever it is, Winnie, Anavar, whatever it is that you're using to dry out. You can always increase the androgen burden manually and get that, and obviously a lot of it just comes down to being lean enough to begin with and suffering. It's not just about how many fucking androgens can you throw into your system, but at the end of the day, did inhibiting DHT inhibit him from getting peeled on stage? No, he was one of the most conditioned guys there, arguably like one of the best conditioning at the entire show, and he's like publicly stated he's on finasteride. He's been on it for, I don't know, like 5+ years, if not more than that. So no, it made absolutely no difference on his physique. Now again, this guy is enhanced, so he can manually manipulate his androgen profile relative to his estrogenicity and whatnot. Like I said, the average person can't do that. So as a natural who has that DHT inhibited, going to increase substantially inhibited fat loss? Not really, to be honest. Like maybe a little bit in terms of like the cosmetic effect that DHT would otherwise provide, but it's not so substantial that it's going to be a night and day difference. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to largely, are you lean enough because you've lost enough body fat through calorie restriction and energy expenditure, rather than do you have a little bit more grain from your endogenous androgens versus inhibiting that little bit or decent amount through systemic inhibition at 5-AR. So yeah, obviously, optimal neurological effects, optimal body composition outcomes would probably be achieved by having 5-alpha reductase not inhibited. But at the end of the day, is it going to make that big of a difference? If you're enhanced, definitely not, because you have so much other shit interplaying that has absolutely nothing to do with 5-AR. It's already 5-alpha reduced, or it's just something that doesn't need to 5-alpha reduce or be inhibited from 5-alpha reducing to have its, properties that you're trying to get out of it from a cosmetic aspect. And then on the natural side, no, it's just inhibiting it just does not really make that much of a difference at the end of the day, from what I've seen. So no, don't worry about it. It's not something that is, I feel like should be a make or break in terms of deciding if you are going to implement it in a hair loss prevention regimen. It's not something that's going to totally prevent you from getting shredded or making progress in the gym. Some people might even argue that it helps to some extent, and I'm not going to go so far as to say that. It is interesting though when you look at these pseudo-hermaphrodites that have 5-alpha reductase deficiencies / mutations, and they are indeed more muscular than their counterpart siblings who are, even when you have twins and one has a 5-AR mutation and one doesn't, one has a normal amount of DHT and one has more testosterone and no DHT, the one with no DHT and more testosterone is actually more muscular. And you could, you would theorize that it's because testosterone is the actual hormone that is going to build muscle in muscle tissue by attaching to AR, whereas DHT in muscle tissue is not really all that useful for building actual tissue. It has several different downstream functions though that facilitate health in ideal, neurological function, sense of well-being, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of sex drive. There's a lot of major things that DHT is there for, and it's very important for, especially in puberty. You don't want to be inhibiting it. But at the end of the day, if you're a full-grown adult, you're natural or enhanced, is it going to be a make or break on if you get shredded or not? I don't think so. So anyways, take from that what you will. Thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplatesmoredates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. Follow me on, I don't know. I think that's it. I think I'm on Parler too. If you want to support the channel, you can check out any of the companies I'm associated with or own or whatever in the video description below. My TRT clinic, Gorilla Mind, Nootropic, and pre-workout formulas, and then anything else I'm sort of associated with. If you want to support the channel, all that stuff is in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.